Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lavish. Me and my group members have decided to give presentation on the topic WHMIS.
So my group members are me, Rajat Rathi, Siva Rama Prasad Sandilya Nadella, Ashwin Suresh, and Mani Rajesh Kumar Shah.
So I will be starting with what exactly WHMIS stands for. So WHMIS stands for Workplace Hazardous Material Information System. It provides the health and safety information on hazardous products intended for use, handling, or storage in Canadian workplace. So WHMIS first became law in 1988. So later on in 2015, some additions were done to WHMIS 1988. This is referred to as WHMIS 2015. So more about WHMIS 2015 will be discussed later in the slide. So WHMIS gives information about hazardous chemicals or products to workers and employees. It helps in reducing workplace accidents and injuries. WHMIS has aligned with GHS, that is globally harmonized system. So aligning with it offers various benefits, like it offers more comprehensive hazard classification, standardized languages, and introduction of new hazard classes. So the next topic is, why was it created? What was the reason behind creating WHMIS? It was created in response to Canadian workers' right to know about the safety and health hazards that may be associated with material or chemical they use at work. It was created to reduce the injuries and illness caused by hazardous material that can cause or contribute to many serious health effects such as irritation of skins, burns, heart, liver, kidney problems, cancer, etc. So this slide will cover the key elements of WHMIS. So the key elements includes identification, information, and knowledge. So identification includes proper labeling on hazardous products. Information includes the safety data sheets, and knowledge includes providing proper worker education and training. So the next is WHMIS responsibilities. WHMIS is a shared responsibility of supplier, employer, and the employee. So this slide will cover the responsibilities of supplier, employer, and the employee. Starting with the supplier. So the supplier is responsible for providing labels and safety data sheets for all hazardous products that they import or manufacture. Moving on to the employer should exactly know what kind of hazardous products are present. It is the responsibility of employer to ensure that the hazardous products are used correctly and are handled and stored in the correct way. So the next responsibility of employer includes making sure that the safety data sheets are easy for workers to find and read. Employers should also make sure that all the containers are labeled properly. Employers should determine who may be exposed to the hazardous product and accordingly educate the workers. So moving on to the employer, the main responsibility includes participating in WHMIS training and education. Employees should follow the proper instructions told to them and should follow all safety procedures to prevent any kind of injury. As employees are directly exposed to different hazardous materials, so they should be aware of different products and symbols. And also, like, employers should use their knowledge of WHMIS to work as safely as possible. Additionally, the workers have the right to refuse the work that they feel or believe is dangerous. So the next is WHMIS exclusions. WHMIS cover all the hazardous products used as workplace, but these are the list of some of the products which are not included in WHMIS 2015. So these includes explosives, a cosmetic device, drug or food, pest control, consumer product as defined in Canada Consumer Product Safety Act, wood or products made of wood, manufactured articles, etc. So the next is, what is the difference between WHMIS 1988 and 2015? So on 11th of February 2015, few changes were done to the WHMIS 1988. So compared to the WHMIS 1988, few changes and additions were done. So many changes were done to the pictograms. The round shape is now a diagonal shape. The drawings has been modified. WHMIS 1988 had 8 pictograms, whereas WHMIS 2015 now has 10. So on the right side, we can see that in 1988 the symbols were enclosed in round circles, whereas in 2015 the symbols are now enclosed in a red square set. So this table shows the difference between WHMIS 1988 and WHMIS 2015. So under WHMIS 1988, we can see the word controlled products. So basically, controlled products are any substances that is compressed gas or a substances that is poisonous, infectious, or is a flammable. So also in 1988, WHMIS, only 9 sections were there in material safety data sheets, which later on in WHMIS 2015 were increased to 16, and also the order is very structured and specified. Also, the round black and white hazard symbols were changed to square at tilted 45-degree in WHMS 2015. So this slide shows the picture of WHMIS pictograms. So basically the pictograms are the graphic images that give information to user and workers of hazardous product. So symbols are enclosed in a red square set. Together this set and symbol are referred to as a pictogram. For an example, if the product is flammable, it will have a flame symbol on it. So similarly, depending on the type of hazard, symbols are pasted on the containers. So more about these symbols will be covered in the later slides by Rajat Rathi.
Hello everyone, my name is Rajat Rathi and I'll be dealing with the topic of labels in WHMIS system 2015. So Canada has aligned the WHMIS label system with globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, that is GHS. The supplier requirements are regulated by the Hazardous Product Act and the Hazardous Products Regulation. The government body, that is Health Canada, is responsible for the overall WHMIS supply-related laws, and it is also regulated in the workplace by the provinces, territories, and federal governments, where the federal regulated workplaces are there under their occupational health and safety legislations. According to WHMIS legislation, all the products that fall under the category of hazardous products needs to be labeled, and because labeling provides the first sign of alert to the person and the necessary precautions that should be taken. Generally, the supplier of the product supplying to the customer labels the hazardous products. Once the hazardous product comes into the workplace, then it is the responsibility of the employer to label it in the workplace whenever it is appropriate. Now we come to the different types of labels, and there are two types as you can see. First is the supplier label and second is the workplace label. Supplier label is the one which is provided by the supplier of the product, and the workplace label is the one which is labeled when if a product is produced at the workplace, or the product is decanted or transferred into another container, or when the supplier label is lost or is not readable, then workplace labels are being labeled on the product. Next we come to the information that should be there in a supplier label. The information should be present both in English and French and should give away the following information: product identifier, that is the brand name, the chemical name, the common name, etc. Then comes initial supplier identifier, that is the name, address, and the telephone number of either the Canadian manufacturer or the Canadian importer. Then comes pictograms, where which is hazard symbol within a red square set on one of its points. Then comes signal word like danger, symbolizing higher risk, and warning, which means less risk. Next comes the hazardous statement. Each hazard class and category has been assigned a hazardous statements, like for flammable gases it can be extremely flammable gas. For highly pressurized products, it can be said that contains high pressure product and it may explode if heated. Then comes precautionary statements. Precautionary statements are basically the advice on how to minimize or prevent the adverse effects resulting due to exposure of this hazardous material products. So these are of five kinds: general, preventive, response, storage, and disposal. For example, we can say keep container tightly closed, don't expose to sunlight, wear of protective equipments, etc. The last one is the supplemental label information, which is based on the classification of the material. For example, if we have more than one ingredients present in the mixture, present in the product, and we don't know the toxicity level, then there should be a clear statement stating the percentage of the mix of individual ingredients in the mixture and their toxicity as well. Next, we come to the look of supplier label. As we can see, the supplier label is present both in French and English language, and it should contain the pictogram, signal word, and the hazard statement in all grouped together. Then it should be easily readable, and it should be in contrast with other information on the product container. Then information in a workplace label. What all should be there in a workplace label? So workplace label should contain the product name, the safe handling precautions, and references to SDS. Next comes what is the role of a worker uh, in understanding the label or in reducing the hazard. The worker should check the label. He should be he should able to understand what are the instructions given in the label so as to reduce the risk of turning a hazard into an accident. Then if he is not able to understand something, he should ask for the help of the supervisor. And if there is bad condition of the supplier label, then he should ask for the new label to be put in place of the supplier label. And the product without any label should not be used by him. So WHMIS 2015 for laboratories. There are various situations for hazardous products in a laboratory, like product purchased for the lab, small containers, decanted products, hazardous products developed in lab samples, and biohazardous infectious materials. The supplier labels for small containers usually contain less information, and no label is required for a container of 100 ml or less. A sample label for small container is shown in the figure. Next comes the requirement for laboratory samples. According to WHMIS, the package containing less than 10 kg of hazardous products does not require a label and is considered sample. Sample means the one which is used only for testing purposes and not any other activities other than the testing. For example, control testing, development of industrial processes, etc. The minimum information that is present in a sample label is given in the figure shown here. Next comes biohazardous infectious materials, which are basically microorganisms like bacteria, viruses. Um there, the hazardous information is given by a 9 heading appendix of specific biohazard, and these are hazard identification, dissemination, stability and viability, first aid, medical laboratory hazard, exposure control, handling and storage, and regulatory and other informations. Thank you so much.
Hi, I am Sivaram Prasad and I am going to present about the nuclear disasters, Warrior WHMIS, and different types of hazards and their control strategies in the nuclear industries. This slide consists of the nuclear disasters which happened all over the world during 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s. This graph depicts the different kinds of nuclear disasters which happened all over the world during 1980s to recent times and have been scaled it as per the INES standards from an event scale ranging from 1 to 7, where INES means International Nuclear Event Scale. As you can see from the graph, Fukushima and Chernobyl nuclear disasters which happened in 2011 and 1986 respectively has recorded the highest as per the INES, which means they have higher impact on the world compared to the other natural disasters. By seeing all the different kinds of natural disasters which happened all over the world, Canadian government has taken some initiative in forming WHMIS, which means Workplace Hazardous Material Information System, and an overview of the WHMIS is provided in the next slide. Here is a short video on the overview of the WHMIS.
The Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, commonly referred to as Whmis, first came into effect on October 31st, 1988. It was created to address the rights of Canadian workers to know about health and safety hazards associated with chemicals that they use or may come in contact with in the workplace. In February 2015, Canada aligned Whmis with the globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. GHS was developed as an international initiative to bring global standardization to chemical hazard classification and communication. While the adoption of GHS has resulted in some changes to Whmis, it offers the same, if not additional protection to workers. GHS is a global system that was developed by the United Nations with the expectation that it would increase safety for employees who work around hazardous chemicals. GHS standardizes how chemical hazards are classified and how the health and safety information associated with hazardous products is communicated. So basically, the same thing that Whmis was created for, except GHS is meant to standardize this on a global scale. Makes perfect sense considering how much importing and exporting is happening these days. Think about it. Imagine if your company was getting hazardous products from several different countries, and each of those countries had a different system in place for classifying and communicating information about them. This could be really confusing for all of us, and it would be a nightmare to train everyone and stay up to speed on all the systems. GHS is a good thing, and the changes to Whmis are welcomed.
These are some of the advertisement posters which have been placed in the workplace so that the workers will see the different classified materials which have been placed in that location and the type of the protective gear they need to wear for working in that particular environment. As you can see, this slide provides a tabular view of the hazards and the control strategies. The control strategies are divided as the engineering strategies, administrative strategies, and the PPE strategies, whereas the hazards are classified depending upon their occurrences as the airborne chemicals, droplets of chemicals, and environmental contamination due to longer exposure. The most common way to prevent all these hazards from happening is by having a protective gear depending upon the environment we are working, and to check the gear if it is working or not, and also have a early detection system so as to prevent these hazards from happening.
Hey everyone, my name is Ashwin and I'll be going into detail about who really needs Whmis training. Before I go into depth about the types of jobs that require Whmis training, here is a short video that explains the types of Whmis training and who really needs Whmis training.
Who the heck needs Whmis training anyways? Having a hard time finding a clear answer to this super popular question, no matter how much you search? Stick around and I'll finally clear things up for you. Hey everyone, Dave here with onlinewhmis.ca. Without a doubt, who needs Whmis training is one of the most common questions relating to Whmis. Depending on where you search or who you ask, answers can range from everyone in Canada to only workers who use chemicals regularly. So which one is it? Who actually needs Whmis training? The answer may not be as simple as it seems, and we'll need to examine the specific purpose of Whmis training to get a little bit closer. The simple goal of Whmis training is to protect Canadian workers from chemical hazards in the workplace. This helps us narrow things down right off the bat. For someone to require Whmis training, they need to A, be a worker in Canada, and B, have the potential to be exposed to chemical hazards in the workplace. It's easy to determine whether or not someone is a worker in Canada. However, determining whether or not they may be exposed to chemical hazards can range from easy and obvious to not so certain. The fact is, hazardous products can be found in nearly all workplaces, and regardless of a worker's job position and duties, in most cases, the potential exists for them to be exposed to these products. The simple answer to the question is this: most Canadian workers will need Whmis training at some point throughout their careers. This includes factory workers, automotive workers, employees in retail and food industries, cleaners, contractors, officer staff, and healthcare workers, just to name a few. So Whmis training is intended for employees who work with or are in close proximity to one or more hazardous products. Employers are required to determine potential hazards in their workplace and provide Whmis education and training to maintain worker safety. There are actually two types of Whmis training: general training, which is commonly referred to as education or generic Whmis training, and workplace-specific training. General Whmis training includes information about the Whmis legislation, the adverse effects of exposure to hazardous products, how to read labels and safety data sheets, as well as other relevant general information about Whmis. This type of training can be taken live in a classroom, via video, or even through online training. Workplace-specific Whmis training varies from company to company and includes information that's unique to the workplace and chemicals that are being used within it. This includes specific safety precautions, emergency procedures, required PPE, and specific policies and procedures. This training is taken in the workplace and usually directly on the work site. While nearly all Canadian workers require, at minimum, general Whmis training, employers need to determine if workplace-specific Whmis training is also required. If you're an employer and there's any chance that your workers might be exposed to hazardous products, you'll need to provide them with Whmis training. If you're a worker and you work with or around hazardous products and you haven't yet received Whmis training, talk to your supervisor right away and let them know that you need the training ASAP.
Whmis training is essential for employees who work with hazardous products in either close proximity or directly, and it is the employer's responsibility to determine the potential hazards in the workplace and provide the necessary Whmis training. In the table, we have a few types of jobs that are listed that require Whmis training frequently, and the training could be of two types, where there's just general Whmis training and workplace-specific Whmis training. Most factory workers work with gasoline, cleaning products, and other undeniably hazardous products. These workers therefore require both Whmis training. Cleaners are another class of workers that are required to work with very hazardous products and strong cleaning agents, and therefore they require both sorts of Whmis training, including site-specific Whmis training. Healthcare and laboratory workers require both sorts of Whmis training, including site-specific training, as they deal with hazardous chemicals on a daily basis. Similarly, automotive employees also work with fluids and lubricants on a daily basis. These fluids can be hazardous, and therefore Whmis training is required of the general and workplace-specific type. Retail and food industry workers require Whmis training just because of the cleaning products that they have to deal with. Contractors, on the other hand, deal with various sorts of adhesives and glues that can be hazardous, thus they require both sorts of Whmis training. Teachers require Whmis training as they deal with workshops and labs in courses such as biology and chemistry. However, students don't legally require Whmis training, but it is always a good idea to have students undergo Whmis training as they know how to react accordingly in emergency situations. Volunteers, depending on the jurisdiction, are similar to students as they do not legally require Whmis training, but again, it's never a bad idea to have general training to volunteers so that they know how to handle control products safely.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Monil Rajesh Kumar Shah, and I'm going to present the third section of our group video presentation, and that is Whmis training. And this is my presentation outline. Being trained is a fundamental right of each and every employee and worker. So here in this section, we are going to answer and getting some information regarding following questions. And those questions are, what is actually hazardous? How do I protect myself? What should I do if there is an accident? And how do I get more information on these safety issues? In first part of this clip, we can see one injured employee gets served by his colleague employee. In second clip, we can see how one employee gets some irritation and some inhalation issue. Based on that, how one supervisor is helping his co-worker how to use this type of safety marks while working in hazardous areas. In this clip, as we can see, one employee is filling up a container and keeping it on the table without any kind of worksite labeling. And at the same time, another employee who is uh, doing puncturing of a tube is asking for a water, maybe what I'm guessing is right. Then his coworker is helping him to getting water, and this has a very big potential hazard to harm that employee. Here in this clip, we can see how an older or an experienced employee is using a labeled chemical container for washing his hands instead of using water. There are mainly three key areas of Whmis training. The first one is labeling of the material that has been defined in detail by my colleague Rajat. The extended version of material labeling is material safety data sheet. They contains the top to bottom of detail of that particular product or a material. This material safety datasheet is easily accessible to each and every worker at any time. And the third important area is workers' educations. And factory, retail, cleaner, contractor, food industry, healthcare, all workers has to go under this training. This Whmis training is given in two phases. The first one is online computer-based examination and another one is on-job training, which is given under the guidance of supervisors and safety officers. This Whmis training is given to each and every employee every year. There are a number of employers' duty in this Whmis training, and those are how to continuously develop, implement, maintain, and review this Whmis education program given to their workers, and they also have to stay in continuous contact with their safety officer. And the workers' duties are they are how to participate in this education program and strictly following the guidelines given to them. Computerized examinations are mostly theoretical and generalized in their nature. However, site-based trainings are quite system-oriented and they vary based on the nature of the job and the material. They train employee what are the informations they needed on the labels and material safety data sheet, and also makes them understand what is the purpose and the significance of this information. Apart from this information, they also gives them idea of what is the method of storage, disposal of this product, what to do in emergency or some accidental leakages of the product. Apart from that, some procedures are based on material type. If some explosive or radioactive material they are using, they have some control procedures too. And in the end, they also have some discussion session where they do lots of discussion and doubt solves of the workers. If they need some additional information, they also give them. In this way, the site-based training has quite more impact and good results compared to online training. Based on this clip, we can say that this employee and industry properly following the Whmis guidelines as they have the label on that room entry door, and this employee is having all personal protective equipment and following the guidelines as needed. By taking continuous participation and strictly following guidelines, and a worker just not keeping himself safe, but he also keeping his surrounding and his family members are safe too. And here are the references which my group member and I have used for preparation of this group presentation video. Here I would like to thank you, Professor, and all my course mates to take your time and watching this video. And I also would like to thank you, Lavish, Rajat, Shiva, and Ashwin, for making this group presentation.